So they took all the numbers of what my job was producing at that time and explained basically how much we could use and get out of a house. Qualify for. Thank you. I know verbiage. So those are the three things: permanent residency, long-term employment, and how much money you have. That's what they're looking at.
They didn't really look into our current savings that much. That didn't seem to be anything that they ever even asked us about. I don't think we had to supply any documentation about that.
Bank account thing?
I don't think so.
I feel like I had to get a bank account thing recently, but it wasn't about this.
Anyway.
It was for permanent residency.
Yeah,
They wanted to see how much money I had in my bank. So the country cares more. The banks don't really care. Okay, so those are the prerequisites to kind of whether you can move on to a mortgage from renting. And now we're back to the timeline.
Okay.
And that is September of 2020.
A little more of a dive. When you're buying property in the States, or my understanding in Europe, or in my understanding anywhere else in the world, when you buy property, you expect that you're going to buy the property and you're going to expect the pricing is going to go up on the property. And then in the future, it's an investment. You'll sell it and you will have taken a profit from the property. And of course, there's ups and downs, but the general trend tends to be up for the property
And right
value.
now in America, the general trend is exponential.
Yeah, so, but I mean, then you have 2008 and you have the bubble going quick. So it's not, but if you extrapolate that over enough time, it's an upward curve on the value of the property. That is somewhat true for land in Japan. Not everywhere though, because I think in the countryside where there's extraordinary population decline, you can lose value way out in the countryside and stuff.
And that's why you might be seeing a lot of ads
for like free houses, really cheap houses.
Those houses are not going to appreciate with time. You are putting money into something
even the land.
Yes, exactly. So that's why you might be seeing those things.
Those are a whole nother discussion, and a lot of people are like, well, why don't you do that? And it's not the glorious situation that it seems in most cases. I'm sure there's exceptions, but it's not as simple as it ends up being. And you end up being very detached from the city, and if you want to have employment, you want to be closer to the city, or friends, or like living in the city. Those types of properties aren't necessarily what we were interested in for our lifestyle. So
we did consider it.
We did think about it.
Do keep that in. Many people have been like, why didn't you do this? We considered it.
We thought about it, but we weighed everything and we decided that it wasn't the right thing for us. No shade on people that make it work though, because there's a little piece of me that's like, man, maybe we should have moved to Shikoku out in the middle of nowhere and just been country folks.
I have this daydream about this little house that's out set on its own land and you can't really see anyone. Maybe you see a house over here and over there, really far away, but you've got a large area of land and you're just kind of on your own and you think your own thoughts in your small house that you don't need very often because it's far away from everything else, and it gives you time to think about things,
and your mortgage is $6 a month.
And your mortgage is ridiculous cheap, and you just get this I feel this mental freedom, the amount of money that is needed for you to exist, it being lower, it takes this weight off my brain and allows my brain to do more.
Yeah. No, but definitely, this is something we thought about.
It was totally considered, and we did not go that route. The weight exists, but the weight is appropriate.
Okay. Sure. So people are going to say oh, that's insane. Okay, so so like I said, the land can appreciate in value. The property, the building itself, will in Japan almost always, as a rule, go down in value. And the balance that you're hoping to have is that the land that it sits on appreciates in value enough to eat the balance of the falling of the building. And the reason that this happens is multifaceted, but it comes down to that buildings in Japan tend to be rebuilt every 30 years or so. So the closer you get to the end of the 30-year life cycle for the building, the less it's worth because somebody just sees it as a liability to have to knock over and build a new building. This is tied into practical reasons because of weather and earthquakes. It's tied into historical reasons because of like the types of structures that Japanese people have built. It ties into cultural reasons. There's a lot that winds into the cause of the structure going down in value, but it's not simple to explain. You just have to accept that this is how it is, even if it sounds crazy to you if you aren't used to Japanese real estate. This is something that we kind of have to cope with. This is what we have to deal with. Like, okay, the building is going down in value every month, as opposed to somebody in the States that's seeing like, oh, every month I pay the mortgage, I pay $1,000, but it's worth $1,200 because it goes up in value every month, or however the number works out. For us, it's the other way around, and we're hoping that the land will appreciate enough to balance everything out.
Tachikawa is up and coming.
Well, to a degree, it kind of is because it's commutable into the city. So that's part of the reason, the main reason that the property costs what it costs, and we'll get into that if you have forgotten from the other video, was $390,000-ish was at the exchange rate when we bought the property in February 2022 was kind of what it was at. So the reason, like almost all of that value, honestly, is the land. Like a big chunk of it is the land, like, and then some of it, of course, exists because of the structure being brand new. So we paid, for the new house, of course, but there's a big chunk. If this house was sitting on land out in the countryside, it would have been dramatically cheaper because the plot of land wouldn't have been as expensive. So some people, I don't want to go way off the rails. One, I'm not an expert, and two, that's not the focus of this. But some people are like, well, man, that's crazy that the value of everything goes down. But let me counter that with, if the land, if you are paying for property right now and you buy a house, and the house and the land are appreciating at a rate faster than the faster than the rest of the economy, which it would have to be if you wanted it to be an investment that you got something out of at the end. Eventually, you're going to have people that can't afford any place to live. Like,
welcome to America.
Yeah, welcome to the housing crisis that you end up seeing in these bubbles where people are like, okay, well, like, I got to spend 70% of my income to buy a property now. It's insane. Like, that problem doesn't exist in Japan because of this situation, which has its problems. I think knocking over a building every 30 years and rebuilding it is wasteful. I'm not going to argue that it's not, but because of the way that the housing economy functions in Japan, it makes it accessible to random normies like us, who are not rich, but we're capable of affording a property. Homeowners, yeah, because the system hasn't gone insane. Not proof, but one of the things that we looked at when we were looking at property around this area, I was looking at like major cities in America, and I was like, okay, 30-minute commute outside of the city, like what can we afford? It's not even close. We can't afford anything outside of a major urban area in the United States of a house that's like this quality, like a new house. It's nice and big, and like for us anyways, it's big. Like it wasn't even a consideration, like in any city. And then we're outside of the biggest city in the country. This is like in the world, yeah, it is the biggest city in the world. But like we're outside of like New York, or we're outside of Los Angeles, like 30 minutes from the center points of these two cities. Like, it's not even close to be able to say that like $1,100 a month for a new house that accessible into a major city, like it's not even feasible. So that's kind of like where our mindset was and the things we were looking at when we were thinking about all of this when we decided to make this purchase. So,
and that's even outside of the realm of having the conversation about rent versus mortgage. Which I didn't even understand.
And that was the other thing, like, it sucks to lose money on a building as time passes, but when you're renting, you lose it. Yeah, every time you pay, 100% of it is gone. So here, even if you take a 50% loss, like the land appreciates enough to only cover like 50% of the thing. So if you're only, let me put it this way, if you're paying $1,000 every month and you're losing $500 a month, that's still $500 a month less than we were losing renting for $1,000 a month. You follow? So like even if you're taking a loss on this, it's not 100% loss the way your renting was.
Yes.
So that was the major point of our decision making. Like, even though it's not going to be in the end a complete profit that we make money off of on top of it, at least we weren't like losing every dime that we were putting into rent. So that was the major thing. It's like we have to live somewhere.
So all of that went into our mindset. Like we've reached these situations in life where we are permanent residents and we have long-term employment. We have enough money that someone would look at our situation and say, hey, you could probably have a house. And we thought, well, throwing money into rent is just like burning cash, so why not make a move? Even though we know that there's the ups and downs with the land and building situation, it's still a positive move from where we're coming from as renters.
Yeah.
So
financially speaking, and also if you're familiar with the old apartment that we lived in that was like next to the Golden Poo, it was getting too small. Before COVID happened, it was kind of okay, but once COVID happened and you were 100% work from home, it became like we just didn't have any space for ourselves. We were on top of each other all the time. We were going to need to make a move. Like that was going to happen. We were going to have to move someplace that was going to give us more space. So I do miss that apartment.
I wish we had a montage, like a poo.
We could just print out a giant photo of it and hang it up behind that TV or something.
You have all many things to put behind the TV, and you told me that we're not putting anything behind the TV because you like the ambiance, but all of a sudden Muttley's going behind the TV, and all of a sudden we're putting a giant turd behind the TV. I'm down. Paper mache.
So anyways, yeah, that apartment was just, we were going to have to do something else. We were on top of each other too much.
Yes, and we had these conversations. All right, so we're heading down the road where we're going to buy a house, and at this point, Eric is really going to take the reins of this project because as a human being, you can only take but so much power harassment to the point that it gets where you can't mentally function outside of work.
She was mentally crushed. She was destroyed.
It really fucks you up. I'm just going to leave it at that. People who allow that to happen are horrible people, and gonna leave it. All right, so we're heading down the road where we're gonna buy a house, and at this point, Eric is really going to take the reins of this project because as a human being, you can only take but so much power harassment to the point that it gets where you can't mentally function outside of work.
She was mentally crushed. She was destroyed.
It really fucks you up. I'm just going to leave it at that. People who allow that to happen are horrible people, and I'm going to leave it at that. But Eric took the reins on this so hardcore and got us to a point where we're in such a good spot, and I am indebtedly thankful for that, amazed by that, appreciative of that, but I also know on the flip side, he saw how much I've done over the last 10 years to get us to a point where someone would say yes to us. So it's a very like hand in hand.
Oh, like the shark with the other fish, and the fish like cleans the shark.
Who's the shark? I'm the shark.
Somebody's the shark. It was a symbiotic relationship or something. Yeah, we definitely have one of those. So that jumps us into.
We made the choice that we're going to look into getting a house.
We're 20 minutes in, and now we're going to start talking about getting into the house. So we were at September in 2021, and I used this thing called Tokyo Expat Network, which is like a group on Facebook that people use to exchange information about being expats and blah, 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 blah. And like, it can be as basic as like, people ask questions, and it's like a community of people. Like, does anybody have any restaurant recommendations? I want Lebanese food or whatever. Or somebody could be like, I've got this problem with my visas. Or people are like, what are good schools for kids that are going to be here, like, or like living as foreigners? Like,
where can I find a good dermatologist?
Where can I find a good dermatologist? And then I went on there and I was like, yo, I'm like thinking about buying a property, like buying a house. I know nothing about the housing market in Japan. How can I get into this and start at least having a discussion about like what types of properties might be affordable, or if it's even feasible, maybe we can't even do it. So I made this post and got hooked up with this dude, Emil. And he is an Australian, And he's about my age, I guess, probably, maybe something like that. He's in his 40s, maybe late 30s.
He's between you and I. He's either my age, your age, or in between.
So he's an Australian dude who's lived in Japan for, I think, 15 years or something like that. And he's bought a couple of houses on his own, and he's now like a professional real estate agent.
And must also put in here that he is professional, but he's enthusiastic. He likes all the nooks and crannies of all of the information, all of the processes. He wants to know the why of everything, and he will tell you the why of everything.
Yeah.
It can be beneficial, sometimes it can be overwhelming, but at the same time
I'd rather have more information than not enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you got hooked up with him through just posting
Facebook,
on there, and then we had a meeting with Emil, which I thought was going to be like an hour and a half, and it was 3 hours long.
You know, this was like over Skype or something like that, like one of like a Facebook video call or something like that. And we basically laid out our situation, and we're like, is this possible? Like, is this? And he reassured us, like, yeah, okay, your situation, your budget, what you've got going on, your permanent residency, you can buy a property. Like, we can make this happen. And
yeah, and it was kind of astounding to hear that.
We were worried a lot about, like, just like the systems and everything, and he knows the systems, and he worked us through the whole system. This entire thing we're going to talk about, he is acing. Like, he knows exactly how to do it. And the hardest part is making sure that we can get financing. Like, as foreigners, you are not seeing as, like, it's not easy to just go to any bank and get financing. But he knows the banks, he knows the people to talk to that are willing to work with foreigners and stuff and work through the system, and he did it in one go. It all worked. There were no major hitches.
Should also point out that we will put information about Emil.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to remember that.
And just so that if this is a road that you're heading down, and please keep it serious. If you're serious about this, don't waste Emil's time. He's too valuable of a resource for that to be used in that way. So if you're serious about this, head down the Emil road, because he will take it seriously, and he will take you on a journey that will put you in a spot you never thought you could be in.
So
that said.
We had that discussion and everything, and the next step was basically for me to do a lot of research and understand what things are available in the areas that we're willing to live in, and what things are affordable and what things cost, and like calibrate my mind so that when I see things, I'm like, yeah, that house is a proper deal, that house is a proper deal. And the mill helped me a lot with this. If something was way priced wrong or something like that, or there's some critical issue with it, or there's a reason it's too cheap, and he's like, no, this is why this is too cheap, or whatever. Some of the houses, like, it's like you buy the house and it's on leased land, like things like that. So it's like, and then it makes it look really cheap, but like in the end, it's
and then
complex.
the building is depreciating. You're taking all of the loss while the land is owned by someone else. So you're seeing none of the benefits.
And then they can be, at the end of the lease, they can be like, get your building off my land. Yeah.
Burn it down.
So like there's like little things like that like he just helped me understand. Okay, then you don't want this, or you don't want that, or that's in a flood zone, or like different things like that. He knows how to pull up the information, do all these things. So we had this like incredibly good resource that's able to function through the Japanese system, and it's just his specialty. He's super into it. It's great. So I'm going around at this point, and I'm looking on this webpage called Sumo. And it is kind of like, what is the one in Japan, in America called? Zello, yeah. It's like,
holy crap, I can't believe Zillow.
Yeah.
Oh, but regardless, like I've never really even gone to that website, so it's amazing that I could pull that up. I'm going to go to the bathroom while you talk about this.
Okay,
I'll
that's
be
cool.
right back.
It's like a real estate searching website. So I am taking and looking up and finding properties that are within our range around the Tokyo area, and finding them that are in our price range, and I'm just learning about them and making documents in Google Documents, and like each one has got its own document. I'm putting all the information in so I can kind of sort it all and see how things are, and what parts of the city things are affordable in, and what parts of the city things are unaffordable in. And then I am going out to these properties alone by myself, and not actually getting to go inside, but walking from the train stations to the properties, and if it's a serious property, I'm like, yeah, maybe this is something we could live in. I'm taking like a GoPro and just filming myself walking through the whole walk from the station, and so I can take it back and show Katie, who does not have time or mental capacity at the time to go out and do these things with me. I'm going out during the middle of the day and stuff. So I'm bringing her back these GoPro recordings, and we can sit there and we can watch them so she can get an idea of the neighborhoods, and I can get an idea of the overall, like, what you get for the money that we can afford to spend in certain areas. And I'm doing this calibration process. And I found quite a few places that I went out to, and I was like, yeah, this is fine, this is fine. I found some, like, you go out to it and you're like, oh, well, like, this place has got like a major road running right past it, and there's going to be car traffic constantly. That's why this one's cheap. Or
there's definitely some sort of air route that has frequent planes.
Yeah, we found one that was underneath of an like an airstrip, like was nearby. So there was planes flying over constantly. Okay, we don't want to live in that one. There was one that was in a floodplain. It was on an island. It was really nice. It was awesome, but it was below sea level on an island in a river. So like in the middle of the river went around both sides of it. It was on a big island, but it was lower than the river level.
And I can guarantee you that some of this, like, climate change, like,
I was just like, I don't know if this is right to do.
I'm going to be on the roof of that house waving at a helicopter at some point.
So I was just like, that one's probably not. And everything else about it was great, and there's a reason I think it was as cheap as it was. So there were just like deal breaker. I was looking for deal breakers is what I was doing. I was trying to find reasons that this is no good. And we ended up limiting it down. Essentially, when we started to get interested was on the Chuo line that runs out of western Tokyo, like the central part of the city, and it goes out towards Takao, if you're familiar with the geography. But it's still in Tokyo-to, which is like a state, kind of. And inside of Tokyo-to is the city of Tokyo, and then all these other areas that are still within Tokyo. We have a Tokyo address, but you're not really in the city exactly.
You're not in the 23 coups.
Yeah, you're not in the 23 wards.
I love saying that to people. People are like, oh, so where do you live? And I'm like, out in Tachikawa. I'm not in the coups, but if you can tolerate me, that'd be fine. Like, I love saying that to people because nobody really thinks about this elitist culture until you make them think about it. So I really like doing that.
So, like, I mean, as cool as it would be to live inside of the city, the price, as you can imagine, skyrockets. It's outside of our price range, unless we want to live in a tiny old house that could have earthquake problems. You have to worry about earthquakes, and you have to worry about all sorts of, like, old problems with houses here, like with cockroach infections and rats, and like there's all these other things you have to consider when you're getting an older property.
And I should, so you're talking about the older property. The other thing that I'm thinking about, and we do have the friends that we were on the same track, like buying houses kind of at the same time, they were a little bit ahead of us. They bought closer into the city in Nakano, which is like one stop away from Shinjuku. They dropped another $100,000 on that place.
And their house, if door to door, their house isn't that much closer to Shinjuku than ours is, because they're they are closer, but they had to live so far from a train station to afford to get, and their house is a similar size, right?
Yeah, I would say similar size, just different construction. They're a 3-story and we're a 2-story.
So you just end up like, where are we gonna afford this? Like, So I did all those calculations, and all this is kind of going on through September and October that I'm kind of like digging into this stuff. And then I'm trying to figure out where we left off at this point. Other methods, where were we looking, judge the potential? Would we done anything differently? Probably not. I'm happy with the way that process went.
Yeah, I think you were doing a really thorough job.
I would have preferred if you could have been a piece of it with me, but it was just not part of the world.
It was not possible. I think I would have broke as a person. Yep. You would have just been carrying around a rag doll that couldn't function, and I would have just been looking at a busy road going, It's so sad to say that about you, but what's even sadder is to say that people would treat you in such a way that you would feel that way.
You're different now. You're better.
Yeah, it's Okay. And things have changed work-wise, but that's not about the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we ended up then also meeting with the mill, the real estate agent, and we went out to a couple of houses. And
This was
went out,
in late October, so
yeah, late October. So it was like a month after we talked to him originally.
we started talking to a mill.
But I had spent that whole month doing all that data collection and understanding things. So
Yes.
when we went out to look at things with him and actually go into houses and stuff, I had already been like, okay, I kind of understand how all the system works. Like, I kind of understand what I'm looking at. And he told me a bunch more, and I learned a bunch more from that stage.
One thing that I told a lot of people is I've never seen Eric as Katie as I've seen him
Like organization.
about this. It's not about an organization. It might just be about like getting so addicted to something that is data driven and whatnot.
This
like
was-
you really just
This was like
into it.
legitimately a full-time job for me for like months.
It was,
for like
yes.
3 months. This was a 40-hour a week endeavor going through all this process and learning everything.
And if
I
you
felt like
had-
I speed runned it.
Yes. Oh
Sped
yeah.
run?
I could.
Yeah, it
I
feels
could
like a
certainly
speed
say
run.
that you speed run. You
Speed
speed
ran.
ran.
Yeah.
Purchasing a house and not fucking it up. It's not fucked up.
Not yet.
Yeah. So if you hadn't been treating it as a full-time job, then maybe we'd still be looking for a house right now.
So for various reasons, we kind of just fell in the path of looking at new properties. Part of it because we didn't want to have something super old, even though that would have made the house cheaper for us. The savings weren't significant enough on a micro scale, being as like extrapolated out over your monthly payments to offset what we needed, which was like peace of mind. And also when you go to look at used houses, it's a little more complex because here people tend to be living in them. So the organization is a little harder. When you go to look at new
Scheduling
houses,
to try and look at the houses.
yeah, when you go
it's
to
more
look
complicated.
at new houses, it's a little more straightforward because there's nobody in them. And a lot of the houses we went and looked at were actually still under construction, which was cool because we got to kind of see how these houses are built. And
This one
there was
included.
yeah, this one is included. We came to this house before it was finished, so there was definitely some like benefit in that sense, just to kind of understand how houses are built here. And our real estate agent was able to show us like some things about that type of process and blah 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 blah. It was just kind of a cool experience, and we got to go out with him. I guess only once or twice, really. We didn't go out with him that many times to
We
see
went out
properties.
the one time,
Yeah,
and then
to see just a
we-
scattershot of houses.
We came and saw this house. You had already come by yourself
to see
look
the
at this
yeah, I
house.
saw the property outside.
But as it was under construction, you did not feel comfortable coming up and saying, "Can I take a look inside the house?" Because that puts liability on the construction dudes, and you don't want these to do that to construction dudes. Like a hammer falls on your head and you're now dead, and it's not a good idea.
But we did get to come with the real estate agent with permission from the company and everything to come and like look around inside.
Then we got to come into this house for the first time, and we were able to kind of get a vibe for it. We have some pictures during that time, which I think you'll probably be splashing up here, of just us and Emil walking through the carcass of the house, the pre-carcass. An interesting note about that time was that the stairs had not been constructed, so we did not get to go up to the top floor of this house. We never got to see the top floor of this house
Until we bought.
prior. Yeah, we did end up going over to its like
Sibling
brother,
house,
yeah, sibling
it was being
house.
built at the same time.
Being built at the same time, but it was already being fast-tracked a little bit because it had already been purchased. So those stairs were created and we got to go upstairs. Is the layout the same? No.
But it was cool to see the neighbor's house.
Yeah, so and I wonder if they know we've been up in there. Yeah, we got to go in there and just kind of get an idea for the finishing-ishness of the house because it was still in a state of construction over there. But it gave us a glance at what we could expect for this house, and we got to see the layout, the floor plan of this house, and we could visualize it, but not yet look at it.
So this happened on August 31st, 2021, which was when we first October, Halloween.
Yeah.
And like Katie had mentioned, I'd already come here and walked around the neighborhood and gotten a vibe. I made you a video and showed kind of like, okay, this is what everything
I'd
is
like
like.
to watch that video again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It was just me walking from Tachikawa over to the house, but yeah. So that was like that process. And then we thought about it for a couple days, and we kind of decided based on a lot of factors. We like the layout of the house. We like the proximity to the woods. We like the proximity to the train stations. We liked the area. The neighborhood was nice and quiet. There were no deal breakers. There were no flood zones. There was nothing like weird about it or anything like that. So like,
I think the only deal breaker for me was that it was a huge, not a deal breaker. I think the only negative to me was that it was a drastic change. Like, coming to this area, there is not a lot of restaurants. This is not an entertainment hub. It is, you live here. That is what you do
very
here.
residential.
And if you want to go and do anything else, like if I want to go and do karaoke, I have to go to Tachikawa. I can't do it in our readily, like, in our area.
Yeah,
unless I'm just going to go outside and start singing to the neighbors outside. Like,
however,
so
we live far enough away from everything and stuff. You could probably have a karaoke machine in the house.
Damn right. Oh my god, let's do that. My friends would be like, "Wow, you're the coolest person I know," and I'd be like, "I know."
So, yeah, it's a huge lifestyle change from where we were living before. But without getting too deep into it, I keep saying that when I go deep. I wasn't finding that much value living inside of
Like Asakusa.
all of that stuff. I want both things. It's hard.
Well, there were some things about our old apartment that we didn't want. Like, we were in the middle of what someone would consider to be like
Tourist mecca.
a cultural area and a like hub of food and things to do and such. But like, it was actually deterring because other people came to that area because they wanted those things. And in all honesty, I think we nailed living in that area because of COVID.
Yeah,
Like,
weird. It's
we
a weird
got
thing
to
to
see
say,
it
but
in
it's
a
cool
way.
without tourists.
Yeah, we got to see it in a way that nobody else is going to get to see it, and I doubt that that's going to exist forever.
Who knows at this point?
Yeah, exactly. So that change, regardless of where we moved in this area, that change was going to happen. So that was something
Especially
that I was
within our budget.
Yeah,
We could have lived someplace that was more
popping.
poppin', but it would have compromised the living situation or made it out of our budget.
Yeah.
So
So that was something that I was kind of swallowing at that time. Like,
I'm still kind of swallowing it, to be honest.
I'm not. I'm totally fine with it. Like, I go and I get on the train and go to school, or I go and see my friends, and I enjoy that walk. And I know today we went and we got lunch,
It was hot
and
out.
it was really hot, but I mean, it was like a 10-minute walk to something, and that was fine. I have accepted that, and I still want to eat at all of the local restaurants that are all.
It's not that there's nothing here. It's just that compared to where we used to live, you'd walk out your door and you were surrounded by things. It's not quite like that.
And here everything kind of feels. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I can't say they all feel mom and pop, but there are a few mom and pop places.
I think there's value in that.
I do too. And yeah, we do actually have a nice little pizza place, which is surprising. So that made me kind of happy. And that's 10 to 15 minute walk away. But that's
So
what you have to do to change.
early November, we started putting in an offer on the house. And the way that the process here works is that you put in an offer, they tell you whether or not it's okay. It's like a tentative offer. It's nothing that's like on paper or anything. They're just like, yes, you can put in a tentative offer. Now you need to get financing pre-approved, and the financing pre-approval is tied to the property. So you don't, in America, when I had bought a house way back in the day, I remember getting pre-approval and then being like, okay, I'm pre-approved for X number of dollars, and now I can start looking at properties. Here, you take the bank a property, you say, this is the property I'm thinking about, will you give me a pre-approval on this property?
Yeah, so say you go down all the road for that, you're hyped about that property, and then somebody swoops in and tells the seller, we're going to give you a whole bunch more money for it.
For cash.
You're going to have to go through the whole process again with the next property.
With every property, you have to get a pre-approval.
So in America, it seems a little more beneficial to the buyer In this situation, since we only had to do the one and done, it was fine. But if it had to be multiple locations, it could have wasted time and it could have been aggravating.
It's just how the system is.
That's just how the system is.
So
and at that time, we had decided that we wanted this location. Emil got on the phone and he called the person that was selling this house. It's still under development. Like, lots of things haven't even been built.
There's no sheetrock on the walls or anything.
Yeah, like you can look through stuff.
Yeah.
So he calls the guy and he says, "Hey, you're selling the house for 41.8 million, and we're willing to give you a little bit more if you can make a few renovations or changes in your construction."
So some of the changes were like run network cable in the walls, put some more power plugs in, because I mean, if there's no sheetrock on the wall, this is all very simple. Raise the kitchen counter, raise the counter thing for the mirror in the bedroom, in the bathroom, like make those changes for my height, and then some power stuff, and I think that might have been all we were talking about at that point.
Emil tells him, "We'll pay you a little extra if you can do these things before construction is finished." The guy shockingly said no. He said, "We're going to build out all of the stuff, and then you can make these renovations on your own." I don't know what it entails for him to make those changes. Like, if he's got to change all the blueprints and reprint them and send them to the city
hall and get them
it could just be a nightmare for him, and I understand that now. But we were both kind of like, having been told by Emil, "We do this, like this happens," and then we got told no. We were just like, ugh. But the seller said, "Okay, we're not going to be able to do those things for you, but we'll lower the price." So it was 41.8. How about we make it 41 flat? And we were like, okay, so that gives us like 8 G's to do renovations with that we weren't expecting to have.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, we'll move on with this. So that was the conversation that Emil had with the seller prior to us putting in a hardcore offer, where that meant we're going to have to
start with
get the pre-approval for the loan and head down this road. We know what the number is from the seller now, and we know what the bank needs to give us to get there. So pre-approval started, and you wrote down all the documents that we needed to do that.
Yeah. Just I'm going to fire through these. Like, this doesn't need to get off the wrist. Japanese paperwork bureaucracy can get insane.
Yes.
Absolutely crazy. We should probably get that binder down.
Oh, I'll go get it.
So, the documents needed for the loan application. Katie had to have proof of employment certificate from her company. She had a salary certificate from her company, like proving how much money she makes. This stuff has to be from the company, unofficial paperwork with a honko, which is a Japanese seal, like stamped onto it. This was a whole nightmare because her HR and her company was, it's just like dealing with some people that aren't good at their jobs, let's put it that way.
This is the amount of paperwork that you're gonna entail.
Yeah. So, she had to have something that basically looked like a CV as well. That was like a explanation of her employment history. And because her company has been absorbed back and forth by a couple of different companies and been name changed and stuff, this got a little bit complicated, but we wrote it all out so that it would be totally fine.
We wrote it all out so it would be totally fine, and then we gave it to my company, and my company didn't know what to do. Like, nobody at my company's ever bought a house in the time. HR was just stupid. They ended up like just giving us blank documents at one point in time, not stamping them. Like, this needs to be official. You know, we're buying a house. Like, are you insane? My company, bleh. They just did a shitty job, which meant Eric had to go down to the office and like meet people in person to sort things out. It was really awkward and unprofessional.
So in the end, we processed all the paperwork and we got approval. And the way that it worked is that we get 2 different loans. Both of them are for a 35-year term. Okay, one is called a flat 35 loan, which is basically a government loan that's managed by the bank. So it's like a government program that exists in order to have a low interest rate so that people who have a income below a certain level have access to buying housing. So that loan covered 3.9 million yen, if I'm reading your numbers right. I am absolutely not saying this right. It's 39 million yen. I say this over and over and over. Just pretend every time you hear 3.9, I'm saying 39 and we'll have things straight. Is that what that means? Mm-hmm. So 3.9 million yen of the loan, which the total loan was 44 million yen. So 3.9 million of that is a 35-year flat 35 government-backed loan at 1.3%. The remainder of the loan, which is, how do I say that number? 439,000
yes.
yen. 439,000 yen is a bank loan. Like, it's a regular bank loan.
It's called a smile loan.
It's called a smile loan. It's at a higher interest rate, 2.7%.
Why would people be smiling about a higher interest rate?
I don't know. So what you end up with is a interest rate, I think once you like balance it all out, it's like 1.65, I think is what I remember the number being. Like, well, the lower interest rate one is a huge percentage and a higher interest rate one is like a lower percentage, blah, 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 blah. So it works out to being like 1.65%, I think is what the number ended up working out to be. So the loan, again, for 44 million yen is 1.655%. So that works out to be 133,576 yen per month that we're going to be repaying. And I think that like the first month was like different and the rest of them are like that, like forever, except the flat 35 loan is fixed. It can't change. It will be 1.3% forever, but the 2.7% loan can float. It can go, but it has a ceiling and a floor on which it can go. Japanese loans don't tend to change very often historically, like dramatically, so we're not that concerned about it, but again, it's a smaller percentage of the loan, so even if it does go up a lot, it's not going to make our monthly payments go insane.
We're in unprecedented times.
We are, because we are in unprecedented times, because I said it never goes up, but it did go up a small percentage point this year.
So, and that was shocking. And Noel wrote us and was like, wow, you guys are really lucky that you
got locked
clocked
in
at this point. And I'm like, well,
cheaper.
Crap.
I think that covers kind of like how the loans are functioning.
Let's scroll back up real quick. Okay, yes, I would say so. Pre-approval had been done. The property and the building had been taken into account by the loan. The loan
and
by
the
bank,
pre-approval came through
bank.
Pretty fast.
Yeah,
we thought it would take 2 weeks, and it was like 6 days or something. They got back to us and like, yep, you're pre-approved. So then we could say to the contractor, to the seller on the 13th, we met with them.
Of November.
So we put the application in for the pre-approval loan on November 1st. And on the 13th, we were sitting at a table with the seller, signing paperwork saying, we are buying the property, you are selling the property.
So that's 2 months from the moment that we kind of talked to Emil and started getting our real estate feet wet.
Yep.
That's 2 months we're sitting down with someone and giving them money because we're about to buy the property that they're selling.
And the unique part about buying the property at that stage is you have to bring cash. And it's a shit ton of cash.
It was $17,000 that we had in cash.
It was $1.7 million. So it was like 15 G's, $15,000.
1.7 million yen, which is about $15,000.
Yeah, so $15,000 in cash that we had to bring in an envelope and hand to the seller. About 9,000 of that went to the seller as like a down payment. And then there was like about $100 for a revenue stamp, which is a stamp that goes on a document that's basically a tax. Specific documents have to have stamps from the government on them, and those are like just stamps that are, it's like a tax fee. And then we had to pay a chunk of the real estate agent fee, which was probably around $5,000 or something like that, right?
It's about 6 from what's
Six? Oh, okay.
on the documents. But I do want to stop you because you've used the word down payment, and that is not a good word to use in